All right, we should be live. And recording.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Very good. Welcome everyone to this North Logan Planning Commission meeting on October 19th, 2023. To get us started, I will lead us in the.
All right, we should be live. Sorry, guys.
No worries. Hey, no worries. Been
Amateur
there, done
hour.
that.
Sorry, guys. Okay. There might be a little bit more that talks over us. Okay,
We good?
I think we're okay. Unless
Okay.
there's more that will come up in just a second.
All right.
We
Well,
should be good
we'll
now.
keep an ear out for it. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Heron will provide an opening prayer. Repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father in heaven, we are at the beginning of this planning and zoning meeting for North Logan City. And grateful for this area in which we live, for the beauties and peace and plenty we enjoy in this area and in this United States. I'm grateful for the privilege of serving and pray that we will have thy spirit with us to guide us in our discussions this night. Grateful for those who are leading this city and ask you to bless them, direct them. And we do thy will this time. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Heron.
Yep.
Welcome, Gavin.
Hi, Gavin. Hi.
Okay, we have the agenda set for today's meeting. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda for this meeting tonight, November 19 or October 19.
Okay, Heron moves to adopt the agenda. Gavin seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous approval. Thank you. We had two prior planning commission meetings for which Marie sent out the minutes for review. And those were. I gotta pull it up here because. Thank you, July 13th and August 3rd. I reviewed and had no feedback. Did you get a chance to review those?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from August 3rd and July 13th?
So moved.
Gavin moves,
Seconded.
seconded by Heron. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous approval. Thank you. Follow up from previous meetings. Anything, Scott, on your end?
Yeah, so last night at city council, the council moved to approve the ordinance for accessory dwelling units, conditional use permits and short-term rentals, those amendments that we had been working on for the last couple of months. They did make one clarification in the expiration of a conditional use permit, just a minor clarification on when those would expire. But other than that minor amendment, that will be codified here in the next couple of weeks. So happy to have that move forward. It cleans up several things in our ordinances, and we'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure we'll have other ideas to improve that set of language, but as time goes on, we'll monitor it. But that's it as far as follow-up from past meetings.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, then agenda item number 1 for tonight's meeting is a public hearing to solicit input regarding a master plan or master site signage plan and the development agreement for the Walmart frontage on Highway 91. This master site signage plan and development agreement represent a negotiated coordination of signage interests along Walmart's frontage with Highway 91 for both North Logan City, Gateway, entry sign, as well as the new signage for the Walmart property. And so there's a pretty good staff report on that Scott has put together. Do we want to touch on the highlights of that staff report prior to the public hearing?
Yeah, let me give just a quick overview. We won't go into the weeds because this is fairly straightforward, but it does require a public hearing as part of the process. And okay, so what's unique about this is, as most knows, if you've been paying attention in the community, Walmart's working on a fuel station on their frontage of Highway 91. And let me open up the GIS here because it'll be kind of helpful just to get a bird's eye view. When they came to the city to propose this fuel station, one of the things that the city wanted to coordinate with Walmart was their frontage and their signage. Most folks would probably recollect that we have an existing "Welcome to North Logan" sign at this location right here. We have a cursor? No. Okay, so if you see in the middle of the frontage with highway number or 91, that little brown dot is the existing "Welcome to North Logan" sign. It's a sandstone sign, what, 20 years old, something like that. Yeah. It's starting to show its age, and we have maybe aspirations for an improvement on our signage. What we recognized with this project taking up this frontage was, if you'll see this black line to the south, just to the south of Taco Bell, that is the municipal boundary between Logan City and North Logan City. And so there's not a lot of opportunities, just given the built environment on this corridor, for an entry "Welcome to North Logan City" sign, a wayfinding identifier. And so when we saw that they were going to redevelop this frontage, we opened up some discussions with them to coordinate their signage with the city's desire to get some welcome signage on this southwesternmost corner. Right now in that location, Walmart has an aging pole sign. And let me hop into the staff report here because pictures say 1,000 words. And we can kind of show versus tell. All right, so this on the bottom right-hand corner here, you can see the existing pole sign. Now, earlier this year, we went through our signage ordinance, made a couple of updates, and one of the changes was to modernize our what we call freestanding business signs. And everybody who has a business on Main Street is allowed to have one freestanding business sign. And previously, we allowed for poles as far as the allowance was concerned, and we decided we wanted a different aesthetic, and we went to the monument style, which you'll see on the left, kind of center left here is the proposed new signage that Walmart would replace their pole sign with. Now, Walmart, they're running a business and they want to make sure they have their best opportunity to advertise and to be recognized on that frontage. And the first opportunity that they saw, or the most impactful opportunity, was that same corner, the southwesternmost corner. So I'm going to kind of zoom in here on this site plan. They had originally intended to replace their pole sign with their new monument sign on this southwesternmost corner, which was a conflict with the city's desired location as well, because it really is that first opportunity and best opportunity for a welcome sign on this primary entry corridor. So we said, hey guys, what can we do? We both have competing interests here. We have, this one opportunity. The city views this as extremely important because we recognize that we have a hard time with recognition. Folks have a hard time differentiating where Logan ends and where North Logan begins. And we want to start to do a little bit better on just recognition and having a little bit of individuality and having our residents and other residents understand where Logan ends and North Logan begins. We actually anticipate that being one of the goals in our new general plan. It was written into the RFP. It's one of the items that we hope to address through that process. But timing, is never perfect. And we recognize that as a goal that we want to formalize in the general plan. But here we are with this opportunity with construction commencing. And so we said, let's talk about this. Let's negotiate and see what we can do. So eventually what we said is they understood, okay, we understand this is important given its location to the city, but it's also important to us. We want to make sure we can retain that visibility and make sure that our frontage is well represented as well. And we said, absolutely, we don't want to hinder your ability to have recognition and to improve your signage along with the improvements that you're doing on your property. They did a major renovation of the primary store. They've repainted the facade. They're adding signage on the facade of the Walmart. They're adding a new fuel station. And so they're really putting a nice facelift on the property as a whole. We want to make sure that their signage reflects that update and that they are not overshadowed by any city signage. And so their primary concerns was the ability for folks heading northbound to make that first right-hand turn onto their southern entrance, which is this one right here. They wanted to make sure, especially with this new product that they're providing with the fuel station, that folks who are heading north on Main didn't miss the opportunity to turn right at that first opportunity. And part of that was being able to advertise fuel pricing. And when we were looking at their original proposal, let me hop up here. Their original intent was to put a nice monument on the corner with the fuel pricing. And as we were kind of talking about it, we all kind of recognize that we have a unique circumstance here in Cache Valley. There's a fuel price war that is going on. And people will drive 10 blocks out to 10th West and Costco if it's a cent cheaper than Sam's Club, for example. And people are watching the fuel prices pretty carefully. And between those new entities as well as existing entities, it's important to be able to advertise your fuel prices. And so when we were looking at their desire to put the fuel prices on the southern corner, the first thing they said, well, if we're going to give up this corner for city signage, how and where can we advertise the fuel pricing so we don't miss the opportunity for folks to make this first right hand in on a northbound direction? And we said, well, how about we give you guys an allowance to put your fuel pricing up on the canopy where you get it up above the rest of the signage that's on that corner. This is a good example here. How about we allow you guys to put your signage up on the canopy so you are having your northbound traffic able to see that and make that decision for the right hand in. But let's also perhaps allow for the monument that you guys had intended to put on the south corner. Let's go ahead and trade that for the north corner, and we'll allow you to make it a little bit bigger than what our ordinance would otherwise allow. And by doing so, we're hoping that even the northbound traffic will still see this monument on the north side, but they'll also see what do we call them? Digital readers up above on the south side, in exchange for an easement and a future welcome to North Logan sign on that corner. We felt like that was a win-win. We negotiated that to where we both felt comfortable. But because it would differ from our allowances in our ordinance, we have to take this through a legislative process to grant an exemption or an exception to our existing signage requirements. Hence the reason why we have it with the Planning Commission, with a public hearing and a recommendation to City Council. State code allows for that to occur if we go through that legislative process. It's like a spot text amendment without actually amending our text going forward. So that is kind of the crux of the proposal. Walmart would be willing to grant us an easement for this southwesternmost corner for a welcome sign. We would grant them some minor exemptions to our existing signage requirements so they can get some signage up on the canopy and a larger monument on the north corner. So that's the crux of it. The agreement in the staff report kind of describes that and details the steps by which we would achieve that outcome. But we did need to bring it to Planning Commission to have a hearing and then move it on to City Council with a recommendation. Is there any questions of the premise and why we're talking about this?
I had a couple of questions. So I admit, I drive past that sign multiple times a week. I just have not paid attention to the existing sign. You say it's showing signs of where is that?
Our existing sign?
Yeah. What specifically needs to be replaced? I know sandstone in Cache Valley is a little weird. We've
Yeah.
talked about that before.
Doesn't quite, let me go to Google Maps here and we'll just do a street view. Because that's.
Have you guys noticed the sign before there? I feel like I'm paying so much attention to traffic coming out of
Pretty
Walmart.
small, yeah.
Okay.
It's not very big.
Yeah, it's definitely an underrepresentation given this is the primary entry corridor to town. Give it a minute to load here. Okay, we'll go to the south. So here's that.
Okay.
Here's that existing sandstone sign. I'm not even sure if the lights are working on it right now, but there is a power pedestal, and we would move that power pedestal to that southwesternmost corner to ensure we can light up the new sign. But yeah, it's kind of the middle of the frontage of the Walmart frontage there. And it needs to be removed just to accommodate the landscaping plan that Walmart's working on. They're going to make the frontage quite a bit more attractive with the overall landscaping and the improvements there. But this is that pole sign that would be removed as a non-conforming sign. As part of the agreement, we had discussed making sure that the Welcome to North Logan sign wasn't too big. It didn't cover, the canopy. We didn't have any trees that would grow above the canopy level. So we've indicated that we would keep our sign at about 5.5 feet tall. And if you actually drive out there right now, they've got a construction fence, a 6-foot construction fence around the perimeter as they're working on that site. And I went out there just because I wanted to make sure from a scale perspective, we weren't selling ourselves short and it wasn't going to be too small. We want to make sure that in the agreement that those dimensions made sense. And with a 6-foot sign, I almost felt like it was too tall. 6-foot fence kind of comes up to, you can't see my cursor, but if you can imagine a 6-foot fence, would be about 6 inches shorter than that. So it's 5.5 feet by 23 feet wide is that opportunity. And there is allowance for landscaping. So we'll put some landscaping around it, but we won't put any trees or anything that exceeds 5.5 feet in height. So there's some coordination there. We speak to landscaping and how we get water and how we get the power over to that location. So the agreement kind of spells that out. But the agreement also spells out specifically the exemptions that we would grant as part of an exchange for the interest in that corner. But because, again, why we have to have this come before Planning Commission is because it is a legislatively adopted development agreement to grant those exemptions.
Does Walmart retain ownership of the land on which the North Logan City would reside?
Correct.
The North Logan City sign.
Correct. It would be an easement for signage purposes.
So in the case that in the future Walmart decides to vacate that space and sell the land off, what happens? Do we have to negotiate the signage with the new?
No, we would have the easement. It would be a perpetual
Okay.
easement for that signage. Now we'd work with those entities, obviously, whoever, if ever there's a change in ownership. But yeah, it would be a perpetual signage easement. So it would stay with the land.
The new sign would go where that pole sign is now, approximately.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So we actually defined that. We wanted to make sure that we were abiding by the 50-foot site triangle, the view triangle, to make sure that our vehicular movements are safe and there's good visibility. And so we've kind of spelled out these areas where the city sign would go, but also where the north entrance sign for Walmart would be putting their new monument sign. You can kind of see those in these dashed lines here is the area of opportunity. But we wanted to make sure that there was enough separation between our sign and their sign and that there were not impeded views. We didn't want to compete for the same eyeballs. We didn't want to have a cluttered view of all of those interests between the city's interests and also Walmart's interest. So this kind of represents a discussion that went back and forth and went through the corporate chain with Walmart and their review. We've had the agreement, that draft agreement, the staff report has been reviewed, redlined, and we both agree on those terms as it's drafted today. But that's where it sits. We need to make sure it goes through Planning Commission and City Council before we could execute on that agreement.
Do you have any other comment?
Is the current sign in an utility easement or an easement for the sign?
As I was looking at this, I don't even think that it has an easement. It probably has a prescriptive right at this point, but
Okay.
there is likely a utility easement that runs through there I know that there's a water line along that front edge. There's likely power as well.
So
Yeah.
this agreement doesn't vacate an easement then?
No, well, if there is an easement, let me actually go down to the agreement because I had mentioned in here that if there is one, we would vacate our interest in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So number 4, removal of existing city signage and relocation of power pedestal at the city's sole expense and responsibility. The city shall coordinate scheduling with the fuel station contractor to find a reasonable time to remove and dispose of the existing gateway entry sign. We would de-energize and relocate the power pedestal. Let's see. No, that's not where that language is. So the first one is them dedicating the easement to us. Number 2 is installing of the new sign. That might be a good clarification that we would be vacating our interest if there is such an easement or a prescriptive easement.
Yeah, just to keep it clean if we can.
Yeah, no, I'll make a note of that and we can add that in. I'm sure that won't be concerning. I'm sure Walmart would want to make sure there's a clean slate there.
And then also, how far does the monument sign planned here exceed the current limits?
The proposed Walmart sign.
Yeah,
Yeah, so in the agreement, we are saying that we will allow for that sign to go up to 17.5 feet in height, which is about a 5.5 feet or foot extension on the height. It's normally a 12-foot allowance. And so if you look down in the exhibit, we've got dimensions, and this would be the site signage package that is appended to the agreement. You can kind of see here. So it's a total of 17 feet, 2 inches. And we were saying that we'll allow them to go up to 17.5. But as proposed, it'd be 17.2 to the top of the monument. The actual base would be about 4 feet with a rock finish on it. But that's where we're granting that exception. We're allowing them to go a little bit taller and then a little bit larger, about it was 13 square feet on the area that it was allowed to exceed. Yeah, 13 square feet of additionally allowed sign face area for a total of 133 square feet, as opposed to 120 square feet is the allowance.
yeah.
Yep.
It clears up this by removing the tall pole. It still clears up the skyline view. So,
Correct.
you know. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Is there any other questions on this, or would you like to open it up for public hearing?
I'm good with a public hearing.
Yeah.
You want me to still read the guidelines?
Yeah,
Even
probably
though
good
I don't know
practice.
how many, okay, all right. We'll go ahead and open up for a public hearing at this time. Instructions for the public hearing are as follows. Before you begin, please state your name for the record. Please speak into the microphone so that your comments can be recorded. Please limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you are also speaking on behalf of others, you may ask the chairman for more time. Please phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. A public hearing is your opportunity to express your opinions to the Planning Commission. It is not a time to ask questions and expect dialogue between yourself and the commission or the city staff. Please address your comments to the commission, not to the public. The commission might ask questions about your comment in order to for them to better understand you. If you have questions or need to discuss an issue, please meet with the Planning Commission members or the appropriate city staff members before the public hearing, where dialogue can take place. You may provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it. The 2-minute limit applies. You may provide a copy of a written statement to the city recorder. He will make copies for the commission. Written comments, if a copy is provided, become a part of the public record, but are not included in the minutes of the meeting. And with that, we'll open up to anyone who wants to speak from the public. All right, well, we will close the public hearing at this time then. And any further dialogue from the commission on this one? I only had one other question, Scott, and I guess that is, I don't understand the legal ramifications of making these exceptions very well, but from what I've heard, anytime we make an exception to code, there may be risk of lawsuits or, you know,
Precedent.
yeah. Showing favoritism or something like that. Is there any concern for that here?
No, since it's a legislative item, the city can act within its legislative power to grant certain exemptions as they see needed. State code allows for a development agreement to allow differing standards to our existing standards if it has gone through a legislative process. It's the same process as if we were changing the code, but we don't want to change the code carte blanche. This is a unique situation where we felt that this was important enough to negotiate and find an opportunity to secure the corner for the Welcome to North Logan sign in exchange for some minor modifications. But within reason, and that's where we have these discussions to say, is it reasonable what is being offered in this situation? And then if it's acted upon by our legislative authority, the city council, then that is their prerogative to do. We are not obligated to grant legislative changes to everybody simply because we've done it in the past. Administrative, that's a different question. If we're acting administratively to interpret a code a particular way and to grant approvals under a certain understanding of the code, we need to keep that going forward. Otherwise, we could be accused of applying the code unfairly to one applicant over another.
Yeah.
So between legislative and administrative, it's a different process.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
If there's no other dialogue, does anyone have a motion for a recommendation to make the city council?
I move that we adopt this community development staff report on the signage change for the Walmart sign and the city entrance sign as explained here in this report.
Okay, so Heron moves that we make a positive recommendation to the city council to adopt this.
Can I amend the motion? Like to amend the motion to also instruct city staff to look at vacating any potential easements that may exist in the current sign.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so Gavin made an amended motion that we submit a positive recommendation to the city council along with the advisement to the city staff to investigate vacating any current easements on that sign area. So now I guess that Gavin's made the motion. Does Heron second that if he agrees?
Correct.
Okay,
If you agree to the amendment,
Yeah, and I agree to the amendment.
okay, then we would need a second.
Then I'll second the initial motion.
okay, there we go. All right. Okay, so Heron made the motion with the amendment and Gavin seconded the motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, unanimous consent on that one. Thank you for the discussion. Okay, item number 2 is to review and recommend review a recommendation regarding a concept plan for the Nash subdivision. And this is a lot split standard subdivision in the R112 zone at approximately 1285 east, 1500 north. So Scott, we'll kick it back over to you to review the staff report on this item.
Yeah, so this is a very basic subdivision. What it is it's an existing lot. Let me open up the report here. It's an existing lot. It actually is this parcel that we're looking at was actually 2 lots in the past. If you look back in the 70s, there were 2 lots here, which previous owners must have combined, I would imagine, for tax purposes, as they had no intent of developing on that extra lot anytime soon. So we went ahead and merged it together. But there is enough acreage and frontage to actually meet the zoning to create a second lot. And that's what they're doing. They're proposing to go ahead and split it back up. So let me actually go down to the exhibit. And we appreciate the applicant submitting this information. Technically, they've submitted a preliminary plat, which is probably more detailed than we need at this point as far as a concept plan is concerned. But with small subdivisions like this, a concept plan could be very simple as as simple as a napkin with just a layout saying we're just going to split this thing in half and that's our proposal and here's the dimensions and here's how it would meet zoning. It could have been as simple as that, but here we are. We have our preliminary plat and this will be reviewed a little bit more detail on our next phase of review. But in essence, it's a total on the parcel of 0.65 acres. It's zoned R112. And in order to split that in half, we'd have to have 12,000 square feet in each lot as a minimum. And we're at 0.325 acres. And we've got a total frontage here of 105 feet, which exceeds the 90 feet or 90-foot minimum for the R112 zone. So very simply, split it down the beam. We'll make sure that we have public utility easements around the perimeter, and the additional lot that's being created here would meet zoning. We have existing utilities in that 1500 north right of way, which would be used to connect this new lot onto those utilities. There's also existing secondary water in the vicinity that they would be required to connect to. One thing that is unique, I'm going to hop back over to our map. 1500 North is a unique road in North Logan City. It's one of the few roads that we have classified formally as a rural road standard, because it is just given its location and its narrow circumstance. Again, this is on the perimeter with Logan City. This dark line you see here is the municipal boundary between the two cities. And on the north side of that boundary, we have a 33-foot half-width right-of-way. And on the south side, there's another 33-foot half-width right-of-way. So cumulatively, we have a full 66-foot right-of-way, but half of it's in Logan City. And Logan has not taken the effort to improve that frontage, as there's no need for access. And so it has remained unimproved. And so given this unique circumstance, the city in the past has designated this as a rural road standard. And what that basically looks like is, you'll see towards the end of the subdivision here, is this particular home, when it was built, they were required to improve their frontage to that rural road standard. It's essentially just a narrow strip of asphalt with two ribbon curbs on either side with a drainage swale. It's the smallest, least impactful standard we have, and it fits within the half road right of way that we have in this location. So in order for this property to subdivide, they would be required to install that same standard along their frontage on this half width. And that would be an expectation that we'll review in more detail when we get into the development plan on the next phase of review. But as we review this, it does meet all the requirements for a concept plan. And so planning does have a positive recommendation, but happy to answer any questions. We do have the applicant here with us if we would like anything clarified. But that's the crux of the proposal.
Thank you, Scott. I reviewed that staff report and it all seemed pretty straightforward to me. I don't think I have any questions, but any questions from the commission?
I have one. I should have reviewed this, but on lot 2, this easement going, is that north? I think going to the top of the building. Is that going back to a shed, and what's going to happen with that? You're just going to tear that out?
No, that'll just remain the existing structure there. This detached garage, it'll just remain on the property.
Okay.
Yeah. There's an existing asphalt driveway. That's what this dashed line represents, is existing asphalt. So that will remain. We likely in the future, whenever whoever purchases this lot or decides to build on it, they'll submit a building permit and there'll likely be a home in this vicinity. But the garage will remain on the property.
All right, with that, do we have any motions for recommendation to provide the city council on this one, on this concept plan?
I move that we provide a positive recommendation to the city council regarding the concept plan for the Nash subdivision, incorporating the findings from the staff report.
I second it.
Okay, very good. So Gavin submitted a motion to submit a positive recommendation to city council regarding this concept plan with the summary of findings from the staff report. Heron seconds the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have unanimous approval on that one as well.
Perfect. Thank you, you guys.
And with that, we will proceed to item number 3 on tonight's agenda, a work session with aligning the municipal code with State Bill 174.
Perfect. So on this one, we reviewed it very briefly at our last meeting back in September. We ran out of time, and to be quite honest, there's still a lot of work to be done on it. But there are a few things that I'd like to get a little bit more time to discuss with you and get some feedback as we start to draft these changes. But as a recollector, what this is, SB 174 was probably one of the largest land use regulations that came out of the last legislative session for all municipalities, regardless of their size, whether they're cities or counties or incorporated or unincorporated. All land use authorities are having to update their subdivision ordinances to change the way in which we review and approve subdivision applications. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to quicken the cadence at which we review and issue approvals. And it's a little bit challenging, to be quite honest. A lot of communities are scratching their heads on this one. And it's not that it can't be simply implemented into the code. It's just that the way that it impacts our ability to provide a quality review is a challenge, just given the quick turnaround times. So this is a state mandate. It's not something we would have taken upon ourselves to do. But we have a deadline of February 1st of 2024 to adopt an ordinance. And if we don't, it would default to state code for the state code to govern. So we are in a tighter time frame here. We do need to get to work on this. And in simplest form, what it does is it mandates that everybody go from a concept plan, preliminary plat, final plat process in their review down to a two-phase process where there's a preliminary and a final. And there's timelines associated with each of those. So we basically cut out the concept plan where we look at it from a very basic standpoint, and we jump right into a preliminary plat. We cannot mandate a pre-application meeting, though a developer can request one, and if they do, we can accommodate them. But if they don't want a pre-application meeting, we cannot require it, which is a little bit of a bummer, because that's how we get some of these large strokes and large issues out on the table and address them before anybody spends too much time and effort to review and draft and try to put something together. So I guess that's up to the developer to decide whether or not they want to come in and do a pre-application discussion with the city before they get to work. I mean, it's a lot of engineering work, a lot of design work that may have to be revised or modified once it's reviewed. So, okay, so no concept plan is allowed. The first step, a preliminary subdivision application review. So the administrative land use authority must review the application within 15 days of receiving a complete application. So that's our first timeline. We have basically 2 weeks to get a review of their application out the door. Now, I guess a silver lining here is we do get to define what is a complete application, and we get to make the checklist as to what all we request them to submit before we will say we have received and accepted this application. So we want to make sure that our checklist and our requirements are robust to where whatever we say is complete is ample for us to review within 15 days and turn around a review for them.
So Scott, if the calendar aligns perfectly such that there is no quorum meeting with the land use authority in that 15-day window, how do you foresee working around that? Call a special meeting?
Potentially. This is a challenge, and it makes it really hard for smaller communities where we have a single planner and we have a volunteer planning commission that meets, twice. Some cities only meet once a month, and that's only if they have items on their agenda. And it's challenging for the smaller communities when they may have limited staff, they may have a limited availability to assign a project to a planner who's not already planning a vacation or they've been planning for months, and then have an application come through the door and say, well, you've got 15 days to turn this thing around. It is a challenge. That's one thing I saw. I was like, man, how does anybody plan, for that and have the flexibility for that? And that's a question. So as you'll know, or I guess as we'll discuss, we have to define who our administrative land use authority is going to be. It cannot be the city council, so it cannot be our legislative body. It has to be either the planning commission, a staff member or staff members in a committee format, but that's up to our discretion of who is that administrative land use authority that's doing that review. If it's not the planning commission, then the project would never see public facing review. Now it's administrative, so there's really not a whole lot of opportunity for the public to opine on a project like this anyways. But it is still nice to at least have it on an agenda, at least have folks aware that a project has come through the door and that the city's reviewing it. So I've kind of gone back and forth in my mind of whether or not we should formulate some sort of a development review committee made up of staffers who can review within these 15 business days. And or if we go to the planning commission and call a special meeting if the stars don't align to where we can get, a project before the planning commission within those 15 days. Karen, do you have a question?
A question, is it a possibility that we could not accept that plan until it aligns with our meeting schedule?
That's not a bad idea. I mean, technically, if they meet requirements, we probably shouldn't deny them to say it's not complete. But perhaps we would say it's not sufficient if it's submitted within a time frame that could be met. Because I don't know, if we were to publish our dates a year in advance, like we typically do, and we say, look, in December, we only hold one meeting in the middle of the month, for example, the application, that's tough. I'd have to maybe look into that.
Another one, question, what's the population of North Logan City now?
It's a little over 11,000.
11,000.
Yeah.
Surprises me.
Yep.
Okay.
So Scott, this is a bill that has already passed the state legislature. So I guess my question is, who enforces this 15-day window and what is the penalty for exceeding it?
So if we go beyond the 15 days, a developer could simply say, well, I guess you have not provided me with a review. So what I have submitted is acceptable to the
Default.
city.
Okay.
It's basically a no review means that it's approved. That's kind of how it would go.
But that's only for, they would still have to come for a final.
Correct. So that's for this preliminary process for us to get that through the initial review. After that, then their preliminary plat, the way that the subdivision's laid out, where the roads are proposed, where the connections are made. If it goes through preliminary, then we review it for final. And that's that second step where we're just making sure that the plat meets requirements for platting. So their line weights meet the right width and line weight. They have the right signature blocks. The dedication language is correct and accurate for what they're dedicating. It's not a review of the layout of their subdivision. It's just making sure that the final plat meets code to be recordable. And that's where they have a couple of these review cycles where we have to review, and we only have 4 review cycles to give them final approval on the final plat. And they're basically saying you need to get all of your red lines out on the table on the first review, and then they will have a chance to revise and resubmit. That's one cycle. And then we can only add additional red lines if there's something that they had changed that needs to be adjusted. We can't go back and add new red lines to things we didn't catch on that first cycle. So we've got 4 review cycles on the final plat to make sure the final plat is meeting all of the platting requirements, just from a technical perspective, to be recordable with the recorder's office. So that's where these timelines are a lot more quickened than what we're used to. And we're going to have to find a way to fit that in. I think our biggest opportunity is to be very robust and specific about what our applications require, the information that we're requesting as part of our applications, and that we don't accept the application until it is meeting that complete status.
Which is going to be expensive and cumbersome for, say,
For the developer.
for a small subdivision.
Yeah.
As
Yep.
well.
Yeah.
Very, very tricky.
So, well, can a developer run out the clock on those 4 review cycles and just not want to change any of it? And then because it's 4's run out, they get what they want? Or
No, we would just say it's not approved because they didn't meet the requirement in the first cycle. If they throw their hands up and say, hey, we're not going to make these changes, we'll say, okay, it's not approved. But if they do make the changes that we request, in those cycles, then yeah, that would be approved. Yeah. One of the things that it does indicate, the state code does allow for us to receive public comment. So they haven't cut that out, but again, it's one of those token nods to say it can go before the planning commission, it can be in a public meeting, you can take public comment. But what are you going to use that comment for? Because we're just reviewing it to make sure it meets the subdivision ordinance and the requirements in the ordinance. So it's kind of interesting. We keep that in there, but that is a decision point, a policy decision that we can make. If we want to go ahead and have a public hearing just as an education piece to educate the public that this project is through the door, then we could make that decision. But I shy away from public hearings whenever it's an administrative decision because clamor is an issue.
What is the notice requirement on public hearing? It's a number of days, isn't it?
Yeah, if you want to hold a public hearing, it's a 10-day notice period.
So
There's half the day.
that's over half the time, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, legislature.
This is a tough one. And one thing that I think is a little bit frustrating is the legislature had as part of this bill indicated that there would be technical assistance funding where they would be providing funding to various entities like the Utah League of Cities and Towns, various consultants that could help communities put these ordinances together. And that is late. They have not actually issued those funds yet. They had indicated that they would issue it many months ago, and we're still not able to take advantage of that. And one of the reasons why we're kind of waiting to see, and it's not that we're not doing anything, but I am curious because as part of our general plan RFP, we had requested that our consultant help us bring our code up to date with state requirements, but also integrate whatever the general plan shakes out into our code. And we had a discussion with them this last week, and one of the members on their consulting team actually is working on template language for those for the ordinance. The firm that we had selected for the general plan, they're one of the firms who are they're qualified and will receive the technical funds from the state legislature to help communities with this project. But they haven't received the funds yet, but it may be an asset in our pocket that we can leverage and utilize to help us because technically we're already paying for it. But it'll be good to have their input at the very least as we move forward, whether the technical assistance and that funding comes or not, we still have to meet the deadline. So we'll keep moving forward, but we may have some help with our consultant team on this project. We'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic, but at the same time, we've got to move forward regardless. So,
So at what point do we designate then the land use authority that would review these?
it would be a part of that ordinance that we adopt. So the
Okay.
ordinance will spell out who we as a community select to serve in that capacity. And we can kind of split it up if we want to have a land use authority review subdivisions, we can have one entity doing that. We can also designate another land use authority to do simple reviews such as lot line adjustments or parcel line adjustments. I just assume keep it all the same, but there is that opportunity to split it up if we see it beneficial.
I mean, my gut feel is to agree with you that even though it is just a purely administrative action, there is value in holding it in a public meeting for the sake of public awareness.
Just for awareness that, hey, your
Yeah.
community has this application being reviewed. And we had kind of had a discussion just in passing with the mayor. What do you think about this? If you had to at first blush, what do you think? And I think the mayor is also kind of on that frame of erring in the side of transparency and keeping it out in the public eye. So likely, I think that we're pushing for the planning commission to be that authority, but let me know if you guys have other thoughts or.
I'd like to see it. And I mean, being on the planning commission, I'd be willing to come in on another meeting if there were a deadline coming up.
Yeah.
And if we find after a year or so it doesn't work, you can update the code.
I would suspect, I would suspect if we had a developer submit and we say, look, the next meeting's in 20 days or whatever, I don't know that they would take the hardline approach of saying, well, I guess I'm approved kind of a deal. And maybe what we also could do is if in the ordinance, maybe we could designate a authority designee, and maybe we have a backup plan for a staff committee style review committee that could maybe fill in the gaps when there's a month where we can't get a quorum together for a particular reason, but we could provide that review as a review entity, staff entity.
Is there a legal, is there a legal way that you could have it, say somebody comes in December and they want to submit and you say, look, our next meeting is until January 3rd or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a way to say, look, do you know, we can, we'll have to respond if you in 15 days, because that's the law, but are you willing to sign this paper saying you're okay waiting until this date? Is that something that can be done so that if the developer is willing to work with us?
I mean, if they're willing to sign away a right that they have, but we'd maybe have to check with our legal counsel to see what that would look like and what format that would take, whether it's just a waiver that they sign on their own volition. But it's them deciding to limit themselves. You'd think that would be okay.
Yeah, the reason is I would hope, and I would assume most developers would hopefully work with us in a situation like that. If they're gonna play hard nosed about it, then
Yeah.
If they play hard nose, I think that's where we would just call the special meeting, even if it is
yeah.
the week before Christmas. And I think we could still get a quorum between
Yeah.
the 5 commissioners and the 1 alternate.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I mentioned, that all communities in Utah are scratching their heads on this right now to say what fits us best and what are we allowed to do and how should we fit within those two desires. You know, it's a rock and a hard place kind of a deal. What's our best outcome given our scale, our organizational structure? So we'll see what comes out of this. I think that we're going to have some good ideas maybe come out as people are creating the will. It kind of sucks we're all creating the will at the same time, and we can't glean from other folks. And that's where that technical assistance would have been really handy and may still be handy. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that we're going to need to address. Now there is a loophole, and I read this in the ordinance. We're allowed to designate areas in town that are geologic concerns, geologic hazard areas. And anywhere in a geologic hazard area doesn't have to follow these timelines. And so I think that we could put a blanket geologic hazard over everything and just say, hey, we require a geotechnical analysis everywhere. So now I'm not going to go that route, but I think that we will integrate that into the ordinance because there are still areas in the city that are undeveloped in geologically challenged areas. And we'll want to make sure that we have that protection to grant us some more time. Wheatland Hills, for example, is what immediately comes to mind up on the hillside. Those
Yeah, any
200
grade
acres.
over 15% you would think would qualify as a geologic
Yeah,
hazard.
so we'll make that definition. That's this entire chunk up in the northeastern corner. So those are, well, I guess that's one allowance that we can invoke to slow down the mandated timeline.
I wondered if the legislature would be willing to amend these timelines and give us more time. I'd say, let's check with our legislature.
That's very wishful thinking.
Give us a little help here.
I mean, a group of municipalities could sue the state.
Really good.
I am not a geologist, to say that flat out, but when I worked with the city in GIS, I uploaded all of the fault layers. Basically everywhere roughly above that upper canal, Logan High Park Canal has a significant number of fault lines. So there are a number of fault lines, different types of fault lines across the bench. We cannot give that often. It's not because there's a canal right there that there's fault lines above that. It's just an ironic coincidence that it runs nearly within 100 feet of that upper canal. And then everywhere above that has fault lines every 300 or 400 feet.
And we'll just say everything else has liquefaction concerns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's very true.
Floodplain. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a portion of town that is in the floodplain. It's not big, but yeah, there's a portion.
Coming out of Green Canyon, there's already a floodplain.
Yeah.
out there, so.
And we don't have to follow these timelines for anything that's commercial. So it is just for single family and duplex and townhome subdivisions.
Oh, interesting.
So anything that's institutional or commercial or non-residential is allowed to go through a different timeline, which kind of raises challenges. Like, do we want to keep and streamline everything? And once we get a process down that we're happy with, we just lump it all together? I don't know. That's a decision that we can make.
If you feel you can get it done in a big complex commercial in that time,
Yeah.
so that northern area up on the bench there, if a developer were to come in, I'm assuming there's a significant amount of water rights, water movement questions. How is that gonna happen? And I don't see any way you're gonna solve that in 15 days.
Yeah. And there's a lot of review from an engineering perspective with slopes and sewer and how do we get,
So
things.
does not having water available on a location count as a geological issue?
No, I don't believe it is.
But just to answer that question, the city can report that we have inadequate facilities for any type of development.
Yeah.
That is the case with when they came in the first time. That was just stated right off the bat. We do not have adequate facilities to provide water to this subdivision. And so it makes right off the bat.
Okay, so yeah. And if you'd like to help change that by providing pumps or wells yeah.
But under,
That having a part no, to know unless you're willing to come to the table, extreme amount of reservoirs, booster pumps.
In vans.
under this legislation, we would have had to have just clarified that within that 15-day window. Otherwise, the developer would have defaulted back to approval and started developing something that we couldn't have supported as a city.
Correct.
Well, you'd have
Yeah.
a lot of improved lots with no water.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they were to submit, within 15 days, we could pretty quickly say, we don't have the facilities to accommodate. We could just deny it from that point. But yeah, we would need to have the information available in their submittal packet to make that determination that they don't comply or that we don't have the facilities to accommodate.
Honestly, I know we have a very developer friendly legislature right now, but I'm still scratching my head at what motivated this legislation.
I think it stems back to housing affordability and the desire to ramp up production of available lots. But the number of undeveloped lots in the state of Utah is extremely high. Vacant paper lots.
Yeah.
Staff entitled lots across the state of Utah already be built on, and they completely ignore that fact.
Yeah, that's kind of what my hunch was as well.
So this Nash subdivision we just talked about, when was it submitted?
It was submitted a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe.
Okay, so that would be about the pace of every residential. So if somebody came in with a 300 home development, we'd have to do it in the same time frame.
Yeah. And right now, what we do internally when we receive an application, we do have kind of a informal development review committee. We meet, weekly between myself, our administrator, our engineer, public works director, utilities operator, and we all kind of look at these things, just make sure there's no major issues. And then, and in that time, I'm working on a staff report going through just the details as meet zoning, communicating that to planning commission, city council. But that's a very quick turnaround, especially if we get more than one application in at a time. Springtime is probably going to be a nightmare for communities that don't have a planner or only have one planner, or that have development demand that exceeds their capacity with the staff that they do have. Because trying to take on 3 or 4 projects, trying to review them adequately within 15 days, and you're just the lone wolf, that's concerning. Come springtime, it's interesting the way that this goes. Like right now, it's slower. We don't have a lot of people coming in doing due diligence because they know it's wintertime. Nobody's really gearing up for construction, but for whatever reason, they think that they should start in March or April when they should be starting now, so they can actually get to work in the spring and the summer. But that's not how how it rolls. But that is a concern, being able to accommodate the capacity or the cadence, especially if we get back into a development pattern like we had the last 3 or 4 years during COVID, where we, had unprecedented growth, and, everybody was on a up economy, everybody's wanting to buy houses, and we've got a lot of activity. The ebbs and flows, and how do you make sure you meet these timelines, and how do you staff for that and make sure you have adequate, eyeballs and brain cells reviewing these things.
So, so I know that where I came from before here in Colorado, there's a lot of bentonite soils, expansive soils. And so
Mhm.
it's very common for cities to have a required soils report before even every building permit, not just the
The subdivision.
subdivision, but building permits as well.
Yeah.
Is there a geological reason for, I'm just trying to pick one thing, right? That might show up on a checklist of things you got to complete. I mean, are there reasons for reports like that, requirements?
Yeah, right now we actually have the discretion to require reports or not require reports of different developers. Most of the time, if they're down in the flatland, we don't require a soils report because typically we're not too concerned about any geologic hazards. But what's interesting about this is we wouldn't know what to request of them because we're not even allowed to have a pre-application meeting to say in your area, you're required or should submit this report. And so we're going to have to just carte blanche say everybody has to do a soils report and everybody has to submit this for our ability to review it adequately within the time frame. That's a waste of time and effort for many folks, and I feel like that probably won't help towards our affordability concerns.
Agreed.
It's a lot of effort just to ask the question.
But you're right. I don't know when the legislature ties our hands like this, I don't know what the alternatives are.
Well, the alternative is that you don't ask for that information, so you make decisions without that information, and then you get subdivisions built in places that ought not have lots, and then you have movement of soils, floods, things like that, where
Drainage.
where they all
for this spring.
they all point to the city, you didn't do your job.
Yep.
Well, we didn't have time to do the job.
Yeah. I mean, in Draper, they had those houses falling down that ravine. And
I
like
think
you say,
that's-
everyone's pointing at the city.
I think that's the only reason why we got the reprieve with the geologic hazard area not having to follow the timeframes.
Yeah,
That's why that was included.
well,
So a couple of things, I guess, for our discussion tonight. I think one of the biggest decision points I wanted to get your feedback on is, do we want to just make this thing entirely administrative, just as an internal review through a development review committee, staff led, or we want to try to keep it in the public eye and bring it to the planning commission, even given the concerns of timing and availability. That's one decision point we need to get to the bottom of, who is going to be our land use authority, our administrative land use authority. And I think we're kind of leaning towards the planning commission if I take your sentiments correctly. And then we'll need to start working on defining what is a complete application. So that's something I need to provide you more information on. And we do have information in our existing, subdivision ordinance of what is required for a concept plan, what is required for a preliminary plat development plan. And we'll just start there. We'll take all those items and create a checklist, and then we'll try to review that and see if we're missing anything, if we want to add anything, or we think maybe this is too arduous for us even to administer within 15 days. And it's maybe an item we can cut out of the list, which I don't know, there really will be many, but maybe there are. But we'll just need to go through and curate a list that we feel like we're comfortable with for both preliminary and final.
now are these applications made similarly online like building permits are?
Not currently, but we're working towards that.
Okay, so submittal is when they've actually checked off all the boxes and have uploaded a document proving that they've met that item.
Yeah, and even if we do have a nice, robust online digital platform, I've seen those platforms where people will dupe the system and they'll upload just a blank document that says not applicable, or find a way to get around actually submitting what you need to submit. So as we put together that digital submittal, my intention is to have it, they can submit all they want, but we won't push the button that it's accepted until we've actually done a pre-review of just their submittal items to make sure they're adequate and they actually have the information we've requested. And then we can manually say accepted And that's when that 15-day shot clock starts.
I agree.
Yeah, we're trying to push everything to an online platform. Right now it's paper and it needs some improvement. We use a system called City Inspect for our building permits, and they have other modules that we can open up to use for other review application types, such as subdivisions, conditional use permits, right-of-way encroachment permits, all sorts of things, sign permits that we're going to digitize. But we're working with an extremely slow customer service department with that entity. We've decided to use them because we're already paying for it, and we figured we might as well use what we're paying for, but it is like pulling teeth to get a hold of these folks. So I'm really trying to push that and trying to get these things to where we can turn the key and start using it in February. But if all else fails, we'll just have to stick with paper until we can get integrated digitally. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, my feedback is, yeah, let's come to the planning commission.
Okay.
Fine.
So if that's the direction, then the question then is, do we allow public comment and a public hearing as part of that decision?
That's what I was just gonna ask the commission thoughts on that.
Well, that's a tight window. If it takes 10 days and then you got for the public hearing, then it only give you 5 days.
I think if it's administrative, no.
This is just my opinion, everything that was passed, I'm just gonna be blunt here, was set up with cities in an awkward position and tend to make cities look bad. The city is going to look bad if they solely just take this to the administrative, even though there's a ton of administrative review regardless of what process we go down. I mean, Scott, it's time we go through 10 or 15 meetings with developers regardless. But showing that the city is going above what the state is requiring, basically having a public process is basically your chance to say, even though the state wants to shove this through, they try to take over zoning for every city. Stop short of that. It's your opportunity basically to say, well, we're going to accept all the comment. It's so disingenuous, I admit that, because there's not much you can do to change it from that point. You're still at least giving the public comment. Where the state does not want that.
And I get, yeah, that's a good point, Alan. I guess I was thinking that the purpose of public hearing in this case is not necessarily, because like you say, we have so little latitude on an administrative action that a public hearing won't, has little influence on that, but it goes back to the public education point of view. I think since public hearings have to be announced 10 days in advance, and they seem to get broader exposure than just a regular public meeting like this one tonight. Outside of the public hearing we did have, then it just gives the public one more opportunity to be aware of what's happening.
And I'm going to go back and read the new noticing language that the state also put into place this last legislative session. They changed noticing statewide for all noticing requirements, and they put it into 2 buckets of Class A and a Class B, and they're different. And so maybe I'll go look and see. We might not have to issue a full 10-day. I think maybe we can have discretion in that where it's administrative. Let me go double check on that, because if we don't have to issue a 10-day public notice, that would greatly help with our ability to agendaize these items without having to be concerned about meeting a timeline preemptively. I'll go double check and see what that looks like if we want to hold a hearing proper. We can also just say, hey, it is here at a public meeting. You know, all of these meetings are publicly open, and maybe we don't call it a hearing, but we have a public meeting where the public can become informed and come and ask questions to say, how is this or how is that, but not necessarily a formal hearing where we give them 2 minutes and everybody, you know, voices their concerns. And then we have to say, okay, we hear your concern about this. Now we need to review this for code compliance, kind of an awkward
Yeah.
transition.
I will say, even on administrative actions that are purely code compliance, I've been impressed at public hearings at how well many of the people who come to a public hearing have done their homework and actually know the code very well and can point out things that do still help influence an administrative action in that case, because you know, staff's not perfect. We're not perfect. We miss things that they may be able to catch that we've just missed.
Agreed.
Now be careful, and this is where the planning commission just needs to be very educated on what they can and can't do with that information.
Right.
If they point something out in the code to say, hey, it's non-compliant here, that's great. I mean, that just helps us to administer the code. But if they come with all sorts of concerns that while it is concerning for them, there's not much we can do because it complies. That's where the planning commission needs to make sure that they make decisions based on the code.
And I
not
agree
based
with you.
on Clamor.
I totally agree. And I'm not talking about the concerns that we're opening up
Yeah.
that, the shady person moving in next door, because that's all conjecture and not code compliance. But
Correct.
no, I've seen, well, even in the last public hearing we had about the rezone request, I know that was a legislative action, not an administrative action, but still I was impressed with what a few people had. They had come and done their homework on the
Sure.
code.
Yeah. One thing that could be helpful with public input is informing future policy amendments to say, hey, this is a problem. I get that it meets code and we have to approve it, but maybe this is an opportunity to update our code or to improve our code based on a concern that they bring to light. That's where public comment really should be focused, is how to improve our processes so we can codify new policy for the betterment of future development. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of that public comment while we're making policy, but it's an opportunity to get public input.
I don't disagree. I worry a little bit about, the applicants who come have a property right. And that property right is, we need to make sure that we evaluate that according to the code and not be influenced by things that are outside of that. And so that's going to take a little stronger education, maybe in comments as before we open the public meeting and say, this is an administrative thing. This person has you kind of walk through it. And I don't know, it may take a little bit more of that to go along with the education piece.
Yeah.
Both ways, hearing from
And for the commission,
yeah.
we have to be firm at disregarding input that doesn't apply directly to the municipal code.
Yeah.
And like you say, we've had public hearings where 80 to 90% of it, we do have to disregard because it doesn't.
That's harder said than done.
Yeah,
It's tough.
yeah.
Yeah. You have a property right. The person who's speaking has a property right, but I can't see this thing I want to see is not a property right.
Right.
And so it's okay if it gets a little messy. I'm not afraid of the mess, but we could open ourselves up if we make decisions on if the wording, our conversation, our questions lead someone to think we made a decision based on something not the code.
Yeah.
It does potentially lead us to going up the appeals chain.
Adjudication. And I agree, but I think we did learn to document better our findings of fact and conclusions of law,
Mhm.
so that, and those are all based on the municipal code, so that hopefully if it does get appealed, with the findings of fact are very clear and the conclusions of law are clear, such that we did not account for the public clamor.
Yeah.
But yeah, good point.
You could do, and David, Mayor Can did this several times. And Mayor Peterson has done this subsequently. Mayor Can used to open up public hearings and you would talk at length about what the thing city council, their role was.
Yeah, agreed.
So that you would say very, the applicant is meeting hope that the city council is trying to legal obligation to approve it. If it does not meet code, then we will not approve it. And so I think at the beginning of the public hearing, you could have both of those, right? Just stating, so you know, this is the intent of the public hearing. It's been very clearly and openly a brief statement that says, we need your comment regarding does this meet the administrative code of the city. That's what we're here to discuss. Not the appearance of potential faults with it here.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Or whether you like it or it's an opinion about more homes behind you. That's not what that's about. It's about the administrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you would say, you could also say, and if you don't like the code, go talk to your city council member.
Now, one thing, to be a devil's advocate, and I'm trying to put my feet in maybe the legislature's shoes, trying to solve this massive housing debacle. I think that part of the reason why they've gone down this route, in addition to opening up more development rights, is just to give political cover from NIMBYism and clamor, and to say, look, if you guys, if local communities need help just making decisions without the clamor, then here's your opportunity to go the administrative route, approve on a quicker time frame. Now, that's wishful thinking. I don't know if that is their true intent, but I think that that is maybe part of the reason they're trying to accelerate these approvals, is to sidestep the clamor that really can't influence our decision in reviewing for code compliance.
Do you, to Alan's point with Mayor Ken, when we notice for public hearings, can we provide a snippet of the scope of the public hearing when we submit that notice to wherever we submit the notices
Yeah, I
to?
mean, we could indicate in here, this public hearing is to verify code compliance with this project, something to that effect. Maybe we have some boilerplate language that we whip up and we use on every notice. That just indicates that the intent of this public hearing is to verify that this project meets ordinance.
And a notice at a public hearing for a zoning change would have a different language.
Correct.
That's right.
If this is
Yeah.
the policy for the
legislative
city.
A wide range of things can be considered from.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's one aspect of that, to keep in mind, you mentioned, when we send out the notices, there's a legal notice requirement for certain.
Yeah.
Legislative actions, regarding rezones and other things of that nature. The city sending out a parliament message or a mass communication is something specific to North Portland City. I know of no other city that does that. And so
Yeah.
we send that out as a nice to say, public, but you bring up a fantastic point. Maybe we are misleading when we say, hey, come to this meeting, because that's what we do. We have a very small window of character, put inside there, but people will actually listen to it. Or maybe we add in sense, this government community come and comment about whether or not the subdivision needs code, or if it's a rezone request. Your opportunity to come in and talk about, does this meet the merits of other rezone application? Be very specific about what they on.
Yeah. And then we can reemphasize that here prior to opening the public hearing up. We can say this exact same thing, but that, like you say, that kind of reinforces to the public, the scope of the public hearing. And then maybe that makes it more concise and alleviates some of the concerns of washing down the administrative actions with so much public clamor that it confuses the action and then makes the appeal a little more confusing as well.
Right.
It'll help some won't change.
Good point. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's messy.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to make any decisions tonight, but this is good dialogue just to help consider all of the angles that we could take and approach this. Those are the biggest decision points. There's a decision of who we would want to appoint to an appeal board. If there's a concern about geologic hazards. So if we have a subdivision in an area that we have determined to be a geologic hazard area, and we differ in our opinion between the city's analysis and the developer's analysis, their engineer's analysis, then we would have an appeal board to review that discrepancy. I view that as we just need to find a third party engineer to serve on that board when and if an appeal were to be served. And then defining a complete application, which I think we can jump into in the next couple of meetings and discuss what we think is complete, what is adequate for review materials. And maybe that'll be our next discussion of what do we need to see as part of a submittal. And then the red lines on this are going to be substantial. I've already started to kind of massage our ordinance. What the biggest thing that I'm seeing in our ordinance is, at some point in the past, our ordinance was split into two sections, residential and commercial. And it was a copy and paste. So whoever did this took the original ordinance, copied it, pasted it into the commercial section, and made a couple of minor changes to make it commercially oriented. And we've had some amendments over time that have amended the residential side, but don't mirror the commercial side. And so there's a lot of discrepancy. So my initial thought is let's not do that. Let's go back to a single ordinance and then just depict what is unique about commercial versus residential. I think that'll shorten our ordinance quite a bit, clean it up a bit, make future amendments a little bit easier. But then we'll have to bake into this ordinance, these review cycles, what is expected as part of an application submittal. Our administrative land use authority would have to be designated in that ordinance. And then there's a couple of other things I've kind of got in the back of my mind for cleanup, and we'll talk about those when we get into it. And I'm also kind of waiting to see if there's some more guidance from this technical assistance, if there's somebody who's been creating the wheel that we can maybe glean from, or maybe we'll just have to go at it alone and see if we've hit the hit the nail on the head or not. I think a lot of communities are right in the thick of that. You know, they're looking at this, they're planning for this, they're getting things put together. But at the same time, the legislature did say we will provide technical assistance, which they have not yet made good on. So we'll see.
And so if we don't do this, it reverts back to the state code.
Would govern. Yep.
And what does the state code say?
Basically what it states here, we wouldn't be able to identify any geologic hazard areas. We wouldn't be able to identify who our authority is. I have to look to see if there's a default land use authority that they indicate would be the default if we don't adopt an ordinance on time. Yeah, that's kind of a few things that those decision points that we might want to make, or options we might lose. Yeah.
Knowing the state legislature, I'm sure they default back to them being the land use authority on all of these decisions.
Straight to the top. Yeah. So anyways, I think that's good dialogue and discussion for tonight. We'll keep working on this and we'll bring more discussion points for our next meeting. So keep an eye open. We'll move forward. Right now, I don't have anything pressing to put on the next agenda. We have a plat amendment. I've been trying to get this applicant to move forward with some red line revisions, and we might get it on the next agenda. We might not. It depends on if they resubmit. But we'll get to it when we get to it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good discussion. More to come on that. So I guess, Scott, did you just cover the staff business and discussion section, or do you have more on that as well?
I do have a couple more items on
Okay.
that. There should be a handout, a flyer for the Cash Summit in front of you guys.
Right.
If you'd like to attend, by all means, let me know. I'll get you registered. It's a morning event on the November 2nd, which happens to be
Thursday.
a
That's 2
Thursday,
weeks from today.
2 weeks
Or
from
3
today,
weeks, so-
2 weeks. Yep.
Okay.
And they do have breakfast and lunch, and it's from 8 until 1:30 PM. And it's basically just a summit of local officials, elected and appointed. So planning commissioners are welcome to go, city council members, staff that are working on land use planning related items. Generally, they talk about regional issues like housing and open space and transportation. So if you'd like to attend, let me know. I'd be happy to get you registered for it. I'm not sure if there's a deadline for registration, but maybe the sooner the better would be helpful. So just shoot me an email, give me a call, shoot me a text, just if you want to go, let me know.
Thank you.
General plan, a couple of things, we're not needing to go into too much detail, but right now what we're doing with the selected, we already mentioned, I think that we had selected rural community consultants, correct? Did we have that discussion? Trying to remember.
I don't know that we did hear with the full
Yeah,
commission.
because we missed our last meeting, right?
Yeah.
So we had a selection committee that reviewed the proposals that we had received. We had 2 proposals, one from Rural Community Consultants and one from Sunrise Engineering. They're both local engineering and planning firms. And we reviewed it with a couple members from Planning Commission, Kenny and Nan sat in on that with Emily and the mayor, along with a couple of staffers, and we reviewed these proposals. We went through them, rated, ranked them, had a couple of interviews with them, and also reached out to their past clientele just for references. And ultimately decided to recommend rural community consultants to the city council. And city council went ahead and ratified that selection. So we will be having a formal contract and agreement put together with that entity, and we'll have that on the city council agenda for the 1st of November. And once that contract is in place, then we really will be hitting the races. What we anticipate for this next couple of months with the holidays and just how busy everything gets around this time is to have the consultant go and do a whole bunch of data collection, start drafting surveys, putting together materials, getting the website put together so that come the 1st of the year, we can jump into public outreach and public input, open houses, surveys, and start getting the public input on vision, future land use desires, and the like. So we're officially underway in that process. As soon as that agreement is inked, and then we'll put our heads down and get to work over the holidays, but we'll have it more publicly facing come January, February. Okay.
Yeah.
And then lastly, next meeting we will have on the 2nd of November, and we'll start talking about the holiday meeting schedule. And then we'll start also looking at the schedule for 2024. So just kind of keep that open in the back of your mind.
Okay.
Tentative dates is what we'll be looking at.
For the month of November, we're still shooting for the 2nd and the 16th as planning commission meetings.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So let me know if you have any upcoming vacation plans or, family get-togethers, if any of those dates in November are problematic for anybody. And if not, that's what we'll tentatively plan to do. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Commissioners, anything else to bring up today? Okay. And our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, November 2nd. The agenda is in progress, it sounds like.
Yep.
So more to come on that. And I think that's it. So last call for any input? Nothing? Alan Marie? No? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So we adjourned.
Second.
All right, Aaron moves, Gavin seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Okay, thanks you guys.
thank you.
I apologize